Lead us in a prayer, please.
Lord, we thank you for this day and the blessing you've given us. Thank you for that. We ask you, Lord, to keep us in mind of all those who are sick and everything, loved ones or whatever. Those that's on the board and those elsewhere that we know about. We ask that you'll give them strength and blessing. We ask that you'll be with David to give him the words he needs to teach the class. Be with us always.
Amen. Thank you. So we had finished last week on Isaiah chapter 11. You remember the scene that says that the wolf will lay down with the calf and the lion will lay down with the lamb, and you've got the child who will put his hand in the cobra's den and will not be affected. And unfortunately, some of our religious friends think this is a literal picture of a paradise on earth. And what's missing is, number one, the context in which Isaiah speaks these things. This is an imagery. This isn't a literal picture, it's an image. And secondly, how the New Testament tells us how these things were fulfilled. When we stop at the end of the cow and the bear and the lions eating straw, if we stop there, we might get confused as to what in the world Isaiah is prophesying about. But as you continue reading through the chapter, he begins talking about there's not going to be any more jealousy between the two nations, Israel and Judah. And there what sounds like judgment language about swooping down on the Philistines and putting their hand out against Edom and Moab and Ammon, they shall obey him. While that sounds like judgment language, and quite frankly, they did go through periods of judgment. If this is fulfilled in Christ, which I think it is, I think this is a picture of Christ. If we understand what he's talking about is a peace between these nations and not war, that parallels with what Paul says in the book of Romans, where he quotes from this chapter saying the gospel is now extended out to all people, Gentiles too. And Paul says in Ephesians that because of the cross of Christ, he took away the law which was hostile, and he brought about harmony now between Jew and Gentile relationship. So when you think about what he's talking about, a wolf and a lamb would be extreme opposites. A lion and a lamb would be extreme opposites. And that's what we got here between Jew and Gentile relationship is extreme opposites. But what's going to bridge the gap? The cross. Christ and the cross. And so when we get into chapter 11, that's really the picture image. It's not a literal thing, but it's actually a fulfillment of what would happen when the gospel would be extended to all. You have something, Mark? You just kind of look like on your face that you wanted to say something. All right, so how in the world do we follow up such a glorious passage? Well, I'm glad you asked, because chapter 12 does exactly that. Look at chapter 12. You will say in that day, I will give thanks to you, O Lord. For though you were angry with me, your anger has turned away, that you might comfort me. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and I will not be afraid. For the Lord God is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation, and you will say in that day, give thanks to the Lord upon his name. Call upon his name. Make known his deeds among the peoples. Proclaim that his name is exalted. Sing praises to the Lord, for he has done gloriously. Let this be known in all the earth. Shout and sing for joy, O inhabitant of Zion, for great in your midst is the Holy One of Israel. So we have four sounds that are going on here. Can you see the sounds? What's in verse 1? What sound is coming? Singing. Praise. Verse 2, what's the sound? trust. Verse 3, what's the sound? What's coming? Joy. But look what else. When it says make known his deeds, what is that? Proclamation. Proclaim his name. Go out there and speak about the good deeds that God is doing. And verse 6, what sound? Shouts of joy, happiness. So I want you to notice that in this psalm here, it doesn't say God will bring us salvation. It doesn't say that God will give us strength. It says that he is our salvation. He's identified as the place of our salvation. He is our strength. He is our song. He is these things. It's not something he just gives to us. He is the source of it.
This is really something that, and picture drawing or word, this is something that the Hebrews did through apocalyptic language, through this type of language. And what this is really comforting.
Yes.
Times are fixing to get really, really, really bad.
Yes. Yeah.
I was thinking of, as you're talking here, one of the great things, and for folks who were raised by parents who lived in the Depression, I know many people that time has passed. But if you recall, they were in this country chronically depressed, and they were facing times that no other generation ever faced like this.
Right.
And what did Franklin Delano Roosevelt do? He said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, and he gave them words of comfort. He drew a picture. This is what Isaiah's doing.
Yeah.
For them. It's a word picture. You're going to rejoice. You're going to have springs of water of salvation. That's what Jesus told the Samaritan woman in John 4.
Yes.
Yeah, springs of
Springs.
water.
Yes. Yes. When is it appropriate to give such words to God? And don't tell me all the time, because I know that's the answer. Specifically, what times in your life would you want to sound praise and words of trust and words of proclamation? When would we do that?
During trials,
Okay, why during trials?
because we realize we need to rely on something besides ourselves.
Okay,
That brings us back to God.
all right.
During
Comfort,
comfort.
okay. When else? Times of joy.
When he gives us miracles.
Okay, when he provides us with maybe even any response to prayer, maybe even in the miraculous way. What did you say? Times of blessing. I put down when God answers prayers. Isn't that a time? When we see evidence that God has heard our prayers. And usually, I don't know why he does this, but sometimes God just shows up at the last second. You know those TV shows where it's like you got the time bomb getting ready to go off and you wonder how in the world are they going to stop it, and then with 1 second left. One of the best ones, now I'm not going to say I advocate watching the movie. There are some risque things. But you remember the Naked Gun series with Leslie Nielsen? Do you remember that? One of the best ones was the bomb that was getting ready to go off, and they're trying to figure out it's got under some code or something. And then, is it okay if I give spoiler alert? Yeah. At the very last second, they're running out of options. There's less than 5 seconds, though. They decide we better get out of here. And as they run, he trips and falls over the cord that's plugged in, and it's how he disarms the bomb. Okay? But God sometimes does that. He waits until all source of our own reliance is gone. And sometimes that's when he steps in. Yes, sir.
Well, back in our day, when we were kids, we go to the movies, they always had this sort of cereal in it.
Uh-huh.
Thing, on Cassidy or whoever.
Uh-huh.
It was the horses that come loose from the buggy, and it was just
Yep. Yep. Usually there were 12 cliffhangers in those serials, and you had to come back to the theater every week to see how they got out of it. I have some of those at home, some of those serials, believe it or not. So how about when God does anything amazing? And that sometimes we forget that amazing can also mean destruction. You know that? Sometimes, especially here, and we're talking about judgment language, he's talking about doing something very awesome, but it's not going to be pleasant for everybody. But the aftermath of it is going to bring about a semblance of peace like we didn't have before. You understand? Yes. And even closer to home, the Oklahoma City. Yeah.
A lot of things I have today, hope it's going to be an announcement made about the park and the garden. We walk out there, I was here yesterday walking through the park, and it's such a tranquil, beautiful place. And it's what a blessing from God. But then I realized that God helps you to make that.
Yes. Yes. And that's very humbling, knowing that God does that. When triumph and tragedy comes, sometimes I think we forget that sometimes we can find praise even in the most challenging of times. When we think about all that God's done for us, and those are things, those are just examples of, just some small examples of when we might want to echo these four sounds. Voices of praise, trust, proclamation, and joy. Well, we move from here now into the judgment section. And the first one is going to be about Babylon, and this is going to be an important section because just like the 11th chapter is one that is I'm not going to be able to get that nail, is misapplied, so is where we get this name. And we're going to talk about that. And some of you will probably remember we have talked about this already, but some of you weren't here. So let's get into chapter 13 and chapters 14, which is a continuous section. The oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz saw. On a bare hill, raise a signal, cry aloud to them, wave the hand for them to enter the gates of the nobles. I myself have commanded my consecrated ones and have summoned my mighty men to execute my anger, my proudly exulting ones. The sound of a tumult is on the mountains, as of a great multitude. The sound of an uproar of the kingdoms of nations gathering together. The Lord of hosts is mustering a host for battle. They come from a distant land, from the ends of the heavens, the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. So, who is the oracle about? It is about Babylon. It's the oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah saw. So this is an oracle about them. And what has God done to prepare for judgment? Look at verses 2 and 3. What is he doing to prepare for battle? Sending the signal, raising the signal, crying aloud, calling the army to him, my mighty men, to execute my anger. And then when you look at verses 4 and 5, what expressions indicate signs of war? Okay, tumult. Tumults on the mountain. Uproars of the kingdom. What else? Okay, the gathering of the armies. Yes, they come from distant lands. There's weapons, Lord, and the weapons of his indignation. So we've got war language. What happens when a nation goes up against God? I have never yet met a nation that's overcome God. Not yet. And Babylon, at this time, wasn't even in power. Assyria was there. Babylon was nothing, as I'm going to get into in just a second. So this is quite an impactful statement, and I have to think that people who initially heard this had to be thinking, well, what is Babylon? There's nothing special about Babylon. They're not powerful yet. There's nothing, people probably didn't fully understand this until much later. Look at verse 6. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. As destruction from the Almighty, it will come. Therefore all hands will be feeble, and every human heart will melt. They will be dismayed. Pangs and agony will seize them. They will be in anguish like a woman in labor. They will look aghast at one another, and their faces will be aflame. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel, with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land a desolation and to destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of the heavens and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be dark at its rising, and the moon will not shed its light. I will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. I will put an end to the pomp of the arrogant and lay low the pompous pride of the ruthless. I will make people more rare than fine gold, and mankind than the gold of Ophir. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken out of its place at the wrath of the Lord of hosts in the days of his fierce anger. And like a hunted gazelle, or like sheep with none to gather them, each will turn to his own people, and each will flee to his own land. Whoever is found will be thrust through, and whoever is caught will fall by the sword. Their infants will be dashed in pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be plundered, and their wives ravished. So, what does the word near mean? Well, yeah, but what does near mean? Soon. It means soon. Now, how come this is important? Well, remember when we studied the book of Revelation? These things are beginning to happen soon, and we've got a world of people out there that think soon means 2,000 years and still waiting. Is that the time frame God has in mind? Well, in the Revelation, we know it's not, because we know that what was going on was part of the situation that was happening in that first century. We know. Because otherwise, the warning to the 7 churches makes no sense. Those churches don't exist today. What did it mean to them? So when we get the word near, and I use this as an illustration. Nona, I think it'd be a good idea for you and I to just go out for lunch and have a conversation sometime. Let's do that pretty soon. Soon, okay? If we do this a week from now, do you think that's soon?
Oh, yeah, but
Okay.
I'd rather have tomorrow.
Okay, so tomorrow would be better, but a week is soon. Okay. How about a month?
It's a ways away.
That's not too soon? How about 6 months?
No, I like studying with you.
How about a year from now? How about 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Do you see where I'm going? Our way of defining near does not mean eons and eons of time. It means something that's precedent now. Does that make sense? Now, understand that though this is near, this is not going to come for a period of time. In this case. Why? Well, because Babylon isn't the power of the day yet, right? And before Babylon actually comes into power, you've got the reign of Hezekiah, you got the reign of Manasseh, and his reign was 55 years. You have the reign of Amos and Josiah, And it's in this period here where Babylon's really starting to come on the scene. Okay? This is what we're talking about. So, yes, near can have many kinds of definitions. But when we read the context of what's going on here and we put it into how it played out historically, understand it still happened in near time, but not as near as we think it would, because there's still some more time in between. Now, how do we know that? Well, we'll get into the rest of this section to help make that clear. What will take place on this near day? What's going to take place? Look at verse 6. Okay, so when you see the words, the day of the Lord, what does that mean? A good day? A pleasant day? Context means judgment. And in almost every case in the Bible where the day of the Lord's words are, judgment language follows. How will they react? 7 and 8. So you brought up 9/11, Oklahoma City bombing, those types of things. How do people react to those types of events? Well, this is the greatest day I've ever had. Wow, something like this doesn't occur every day. Shock and bewilderment, not just that, not just shock and bewilderment, but fear, isn't it? It's scary. Who's it impacting? Is there somebody there that I know? Is it personal? Right? That's the kind of a day that the Lord is describing here. Does the fear of the Lord, this is really an interesting question. Does the fear of the Lord ever account for the cruel or the wrathful side of God? Think about that. Well, we say the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Does the fear of the Lord ever take into account that God has a wrathful and even a cruel side? And I'm not talking about that he's not loving, but understand judgment is cruel. So does the fear of the Lord ever take that into account?
Being disciplined. I mean,
It's hard to see a God that's all loving that has that side, doesn't it? People say today, well, God just loves us the way we are. He doesn't expect us to change. That is not biblical, guys. There's nothing about biblical about that. Respect of God's holiness, right? And the reverence of Him and who He is. Absolutely. So is there a side that accounts for our fear of the Lord? Well, Jesus Himself said, don't fear those who kill your body, but fear the one who can send you to hell. That was Jesus' words, right? So, there is a side that I sometimes think we forget. Verse 9, judgment signs, cruel, wrath, fierce anger. Who's this against, by the way? Who's this anger against? Is against sin, those in sin, isn't it? So there are signs, and look at the signs in verse 10. You got the stars of the constellation, and what's happening with those stars? They're not giving light. The sun even. What's happening with the sun? This is all judgment language. The moon usually is referenced to, it says, will not shed its light. Sometimes it says the moon turns to blood, like a different colored moon, if you will. And those are all images of judgment language. Okay. Right. Yes. Yes. So the object is the wicked, the evil. That's who this is against. And that evil and that wickedness sometimes finds itself in the wickedness of people, the actions of people, doesn't it? That's where sometimes it's found. So what will be the total effect? Look at verses 12 to 16. What's the total effect? Okay, mankind will be minimized. Yes. Like the hunted gazelle or like the sheep, verse 14. There's none to gather. Each will turn to his own people. Each will do what? Flee out of the land. So you know, this is unfortunate, but some of the imagery is even affecting the innocent, like the babes, like the wives. Okay? Sometimes it even affects the innocent. Keep in mind that this passage is very similar in language to other Day of the Lord passages in our Bible, such as that found in Joel, such as that found in Zephaniah, and also some parts of it in Malachi. Now, here's where we learn when this will take place. Verse 17. Behold, I am stirring up the Medes against them, who have no regard for silver and do not delight in gold. Their bows will slaughter the young men. They will have no mercy on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes will not pity the children. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the splendor and pomp of the Chaldeans, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. It will never be inhabited or lived in for all generations. No Arab will pitch his tent there. No shepherds will make their flocks lie down there. But wild animals will lie down there, and their houses will be full of howling creatures. Their ostriches will dwell, and there wild goats will dance. Hyenas will cry in its towers, and jackals in the pleasant palaces. Its time is close at hand, and its days will not be prolonged. So whom will God stir up? The Medes. So, why not Assyria? That's the power of today in Isaiah's time. Why not Assyria? Because Babylon is going to overthrow the Assyrians when they rise to power. And because Babylon's not that power yet. They're not there yet. So, what Isaiah is doing is he's looking at about 200 years down the line. And we studied this for those that were in Daniel. Do you remember the pomp and splendor of King Nebuchadnezzar? Even Daniel himself, what did he say of King Nebuchadnezzar? There's no king more glorious or has more splendor than you. And then in chapter 4, is it chapter 4? Yeah, I think it's chapter 4. Do you remember that Nebuchadnezzar came out and Daniel warned him? He had this dream about the trees when all their splendor all cut down. And he asked Daniel, interpret this for me. And Daniel said, I wish this was about your enemies and it wasn't about you, but your pride has gotten God's attention. So take my advice. Humble yourself. A year later, sometimes you don't, you change for a little bit, but it doesn't last. A year later, he comes out and says, look at what my hands have built. And God humbled him in a hurry because he went insane, really, and started being like a cattle eating grass for a period of time. And then Belshazzar ends up becoming king later on. You remember, he used the goblets and the stuff from the tabernacle to have his little party, and then he saw the strange handwriting on the wall, and Daniel said, your time's coming to an end. And that very evening, it seems, was when Darius the Mede came in and killed him, and Babylon was overcome, you see. So what Isaiah is doing is he's looking down through that time already. How in the world would God know that that was going to happen? So how would the Medes, how would their triumph be a little bit different than other nations? Look at verse 17. How would their triumph be different?
They wasn't after silver and gold.
They weren't after the plunder so much. They were after the power of Babylon. And notice that their cruelty is not to the extreme of Babylon, but yet there's no compassion on their enemies, verse 18. And then you get into verse 19, and how is Babylon described? How's Babylon described? So, a little bit of history. At the time Isaiah is writing this, Babylon and the Medes were actually allies. They were actually allied against Assyria. And Assyria was kind of keeping Babylon at bay. And even when they did battle, Babylon lost the war. They were sacked in 648, and it took about 40 years for Babylon to rise again to try another attack. And finally, 6 years before Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem, they took Assyria. Nebuchadnezzar was the king that led that challenge. So that's a little bit of the background. If you'll remember, there was an initial battle between Assyria and Babylon going on. Do you remember a guy by the name of Pharaoh Necho? No? Pharaoh Necho was coming up from Babylon to help Assyria against Babylon. And young King Josiah was standing in his way and said, I'm not going to let you pass. And Necho says, you need to get away because I'm on a mission from God. Well, Josiah didn't listen. As righteous of a king he was, he didn't listen, and he was struck down and killed in battle. That was the last righteous king that Judah had. So even in that historic situation, you see the contest going on between what would become the battle between Assyria and Babylon. All right, chapter 14 leads us with an interlude to start. For the Lord will have compassion on Jacob and will again choose Israel and will set them in their own land. Sojourners will join them, and they will attach themselves to the house of Jacob. And the peoples will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them in the Lord's land as male and female slaves, and they will take captive those who were their captors and rule over those who oppressed them. What's the center of God's judgment against Babylon? Who's at the center of it? It is his people. That's why he says, I will have compassion and choose Israel again on Jacob. That is at the heart of what God is doing in all of this. You might think of it about as purification because he's taking out all the wickedness that's existing there to make possible a remainder of people who will turn their attention only on God. So while God is interested in the affairs of other nations, remember the message is meant for both Israel and Judah and God's promise to them. That's what the context of the Old Testament prophets really foresee.
David,
Yes.
as confusing as all of this ancient history is, and it is confusing for all of us. I don't care if you're a Bible historian, it's confusing. But one thing that we need to, I think, partially focus on is that God is bringing about his plan to restore the Jews.
Yes.
The remnant is going to come back under Zerubbabel.
Right.
That is super important because he's got to bring them back because through them is going to come in hundreds of years
Yes. The Messiah. Yep.
And there's got to be that remnant there. Even the four Samaritans who were hated by the Jews, they were a part of the plan.
Yes. And that's even embodied in this one section about how the sojourners will join them and become a part of them. Now we get back to Babylon. Now this is an important section. When the Lord has given you rest from your pain, your turmoil, the hard service with which you were made to serve, you will take up this taunt against whom? The king of Babylon. Now, before we get into this section, I want you to drop down to verse 22 and 23. I want you to see how this section is bookended. I will rise up against them, declares the Lord of hosts. I will cut off from Babylon name, remnant, descendants, and posterity, declares the Lord. I will make it a possession of the hedgehog, the pools of water. I will sweep it with the broom of destruction, declares the Lord of hosts. Who is this middle section about? This is about Babylon, okay? Is it about anything else, according to Isaiah? It is not. Keep that in mind as we read this section. There's a parallel here also to the book of Habakkuk, by the way. All right, verse 4, middle of verse 4. How the oppressor has ceased, the insolent fury ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepters of rulers that struck the peoples in wrath with unceasing blows, that ruled the nations in anger with unrelenting persecution. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. The cypresses rejoice at you, the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were laid low, no woodcutter comes up against us. Sheol beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shades to greet you. All who were leaders of the earth, it raises from their thrones. All who were kings of the nations. All of them will answer and say to you, you too have become as weak as we. You too have become like us. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, the sound of your harps. Maggots are laid as a bed beneath you, and worms are your covers. How you have fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol. Sheol is the grave, by the way. To the pit, to the far reaches of the pit. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you. Is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world like a desert and overthrew its cities, who did not let his prisoners go home? All the kings of the nations lie in glory, each in his own tomb. But you are cast out away from your grave like a loathed branch, clothed with the slain, those pierced by the sword, who go down to the stones of the pit, like a dead body trampled underfoot. You will not be joined with them in burial, because you have destroyed your land. You have slain your people. May the offspring of evildoers never more be named. Prepare slaughter for his sons because of the guilt of their fathers, lest they rise and possess the earth and fill the face of the world with cities. All right. So, how much splendor did Babylon have? How much splendor did they have? It was one of the most glorious cities of the world. Doesn't mean they didn't have their slums or their ghettos, but it was one of the most majestic places. This is actually supposedly a picture of one of the 7 wonders of the world. It's the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which Nebuchadnezzar is said to have built himself. It was a beautiful place. That's how much splendor he had, and the power that Nebuchadnezzar had was beyond anybody else before. But what would be their end? Yes. Desolate, right? It would be a place of nothing. And even to the point where, look at verses 10 and 11, what are the people saying about him? About them. You become as weak as us. You become just like us. So now we get into this section. What is verse 12? Who is this concerning? Who is this about? Keep in mind context. What did we bookend this section with? It is about Babylon, the king of Babylon, which would be Nebuchadnezzar. So keep that in mind. So let me ask this. How is this section presumed to be Satan? What part of this section would be presumed to be about Satan? Fallen from heaven. What else? The morning star. What else? Son of the dawn. Okay, I'm going to ascend to heaven above the stars of God, right? What about verse 14? I will make myself like God. Now, I want you to think about all of the passages from Genesis to Revelation. Where do you come across any angels that thought they had that power and ability? The garden? Okay, why do you say the garden? Okay, but did he challenge God? He challenged man in his language, but Satan did not have an authority even there over God. One of the earliest books we have is Job, right? Tell me how come Satan just didn't oppose him right there and show, how come God had to actually put parameters around what he would allow Satan to do? Why didn't Satan just do it himself? He knows he doesn't have that. How about legions of demons? Remember? There was legions of demons that challenged Jesus. And they're subject to him. No, there's no place in Scripture that ever describes an angel ever trying to challenge the authority of God because they know they can't. But man does. Powerful men do. And that's actually what we read in the book of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar did try to make himself as powerful as God and thought that he was. Yes. Remember the statue image. What do we do? Well, that's going to talk about the successive kingdoms to come. So what's the next logical thing to do? Let's build the statue and have everybody bow down to it in homage of me. Because I'm the gold head. Okay? So when we get to this section, I want you to understand, how in the world did this section get attributed to Satan? Well, first of all, the Hebrew word is halel, and it means brightness. That's what it means. And some think it could mean the brightness of the sun. Some think that initially when it was talked about, it could even have meant Venus, because Venus's star is very bright in the sky, and it would have been seen by the people of Isaiah's day. So in Isaiah's day, they did not attribute this section to Satan at all. Where did that come from? Well, in about the 4th century, the Latin Vulgate, by the way, ESV says day star, NIV says morning star, Legacy Standard says star of the morning, and I think the NASB says that too. But the morning star was actually translated to what the word is in Latin. Lucifer, small l. And it took our friends who translated the authoritative translation of our Bible, the King James. And that one came along about 1300, 1400 AD, where it said, the tradition was this is attributed to Satan, and they capitalized the letter L to make it a formal name. It was not that way when Isaiah presented it. It became that through tradition. Wrong tradition. Is Lucifer a reference to Satan? Probably not. But that's how it is used. This section is about Babylon and the taunt of Babylon. And we know that from one last thing. Look at verse 16, and then I'll let you go. Is this the devil? Is this the angel? What does it say? It is the man who made the earth tremble. This is talking about a human being, guys. And Nebuchadnezzar fits that ideal. All right, we're going to conclude here. There is a section on Assyria. There is a section on Philistia. We'll get to those next week, and we'll continue on to Moab and Damascus as we get together again next week. All right, thanks, guys.